Welcome back, crew. These are our honors pre-calculus notes for Unit 1-4A. So what we're doing here is really not learning anything new, but we are reviewing what you have learned in the past about composition of functions. So this is simply procedures. How do we do this? Okay, so we're going to start with some information. I'm going to give you three functions. So we're going to let f of x equal 3x minus 2. We're going to let another function, g of x, equal x squared plus 1. And then we're going to have a third function. Let's let h of x equal x over x minus 1. So what we're finding here is composition of functions. And before we go forward to that, let me just give you one note. And that's that there are two different notations that ask us to do the same thing. On the worksheet you're going to do with this, there is something that looks like this, right? Looks like f of g of x. And you just need to know that that means the same thing as asking you to do f of g of x. I'll use this notation more often than I'll use this, but you should recognize them as equivalent. Okay, so let's start with our first example. Let's find f of g of x. So if I'm going to find f of g of x, this is, I'm going to work from the inside out, and this is asking us to take g of x and put it inside of f. Okay, so we're going to come here, and we're going to rewrite this as f. It's going to stay the same. But we're going to put what g of x equals, which is x squared plus 1 inside of f. Okay. Now we're going to take f, and we're going to use our x squared plus 1 in place of the x as the input. So f tells us to start with 3, right? Put in our input and then subtract 2. Our input in this case is what g of x equals, which is x squared plus 1. We're going to take that and simplify it. So distributing the 3, we get 3x squared plus 3. We'll subtract 2, and we end up with 3x squared plus 1. Let's do another one. So this time, let's find f of h of x. So h of x is our purple function here. So we're going to come in here, and f of h of x is f of what h of x equals, right? And h of x is here, so that's f of x minus 1. So now we're going to go back to our f function. And f tells us again to do 3 times input minus 2. But this time our input is x over x minus 1. For us to simplify this, okay, keep in mind that 3 is the same thing as 3 over 1, and to multiply fractions, we multiply the tops and we multiply the bottoms. So we end up with 3 times the numerator x over 1 times x minus 1 was just x minus 1. And then from that we're going to subtract 2. I'm going to save the simplification of this for later in the year when we talk about rational functions, and we're just going to leave our answer in this unsimplified form. All right, rocking and rolling. Let's do another example. So this time we're going to do g of h of x. Which is g of what h of x equals, which is x over x minus 1. So our g function, right, is this one. So when we evaluate that, we're going to take our input in place of x, square it, and add 1. And what we're going to put in where x was is h, which is x over x minus 1. What's left now is to square that. So to square something is to multiply it by itself. So we're going to do x over x minus 1 times x over x minus 1. And then we will add 1. Okay. Multiplying fractions, we multiply the tops, so we get x squared. Right, we multiply the bottoms, which I'm actually just going to leave as x minus 1 squared because we're not going to focus on the simplification. And that's what we get for g of h of x. Let's do a few more. So I'm just going to erase this so I can keep my functions there. And this time we're going to look at h of f of x. So to do h of f of x, we're going to do h of what f of x equals, and f of x is 3x minus 2. So we're going to come back to h, and h, right? H is our input for x over our input for x minus 1. So when we evaluate this, we're going to take our 3x minus 2 and put it where x was. And we end up with 3x minus 2 on top over 3x minus 2 minus 1, which is 3x minus 3. Almost done. Let's take a next example. Let's do h of g of x, which is h of g, which is x squared plus 1. So our h function, again, will be our input over our input minus 1, right? X, our input over x, our input minus 1. And this time for x, we're putting in what g is, so x squared plus 1, both where the top x is and where the x is in the denominator. Simplifying that, we have x squared plus 1 on top over x squared plus 1 minus 1, which is just x squared. So let's take another example where we have a number, and what you do for homework is actually going to start with this. So we're going to come in here, and this time we're going to erase all of this. And we are going to find f of g of negative 3. Which again is to find f of g of negative 3. We are simplifying. When we simplify, we work from the inside out. So we're going to start with g of negative 3. So we have f of what we would get when we find g of negative 3. And according to our g function, g of negative 3 would be negative 3 for x. We're going to square it and add 1. So simplifying that, that gives me f of negative 3 squared 9 plus 1 is 10. So for me to find f of 10, we're now going to use the f function, and according to the f function, we will get 3 times our input, where x is minus 2, and what we're putting in this time is the 10, and 3 times 10, 30, minus 2 is 28. Okay, that's composition of functions. Hopefully that served as a great reminder for you, and you'll find completing your homework a pretty simple process. See you tomorrow.